Welcome to IPL. This is Gwin here, live from Las Vegas. I'm here with 4-0 Eifer. And Eifer, you had to play in probably the hardest field we've ever seen in a StarCraft event.
Very true. It was, it was tough for me because I got a pretty hard bracket.
Yeah.
But I think it was tough for everyone.
Who did you play first?
First, I played Ryung. So I had a GSL Coda semifinalist. And his TVP, I mean, they say it's his weakest matchup, but that's not.
Yeah.
There's never a weak matchup for a semifinalist.
In GSL.
Yeah. And game one was disturbingly lopsided, but game two was definitely a very fair game that if I'd made just a few changes, very small changes, I could have won.
Nice.
So it was I'm proud of game two.
Okay.
And overall, it was a series that I'd expect from a semifinalist.
Okay. And then you went to the lower bracket.
Yes.
And again, because we had 40 Codex Koreans out of 72 players, you played a Korean the next round as well.
Well, I played Quantic Golden.
Yep.
And I've played Golden on the ladder before. We've played maybe 10, 15 games, and we're very familiar with each other's ZVP and PvZ. And whenever that comes to my style, it's not necessarily a negative. For example, I do Gate Nexus and PvZ, and that wasn't an issue against Golden, even though he initially responded by mass flooding wings, which I had held off really easily. So I was very advantaged in game one, and then I ended up being too hasty and dropping the map due to my own errors. And then game two, I decided to Nexus first into Forge Fast Expand, just to try and be a little metagamey, and I'm comfortable with that, but he then decided to hatch cancel and roach on. So that was a very quick game.
Yeah. That's a really good decision by him.
Well, it's very intelligent, yeah.
So, unfortunate there, out of the tournament. But talk to me a little bit about, I'm curious in your thoughts, why are the Koreans so much better than everyone else? Why do we end up with a situation where...
Well, I mean, I think the situation's largely based on infrastructure.
Okay.
That's the main thing. And whenever a player goes to Korea and practices for a long time, it doesn't matter if they're Korean or not, they generally tend to produce results. We have a few lone instances of foreigners that have, like, for example, I know of 2 French people that have been in Korea for months, bordering on over a year, and they haven't really posted results. But the vast majority do. And I think that it's just, it's the place to be. It's where all the best practices, it's the best ladder, you have the best practice partners. It's definitely the best. Yeah.
All right. So do you think that the Koreans practice more than the foreigners?
Well, I think it's a known fact. But
I think
a lot of foreigners
even
can't
the foreigners
practice that
that are in team houses.
Oh, I mean, I can't speak to that because I'm not in one, so I wouldn't know. But I think that a lot of foreigners would want to practice more but can't. It's generally considered, like I've seen just on Reddit, for example, that a lot of upvoted comments are saying that foreigners are particularly lazy, so they don't want to practice. But I think it's actually the opposite. I think there's a lot of very, very motivated players that just don't have the opportunity to practice.
Okay. Yeah. Good insight there. Talk to me a little bit about, we see this sort of tournament style from IPL. A lot of players seem to get eliminated day one. What do you, from a player's perspective, what do you feel about this?
Right. So the vast majority of the players were out in the first 6 hours, which from a tournament's perspective is a lot of content in a very short amount of time, which is good. But from a player's and a spectator's perspective, it's probably not the best because there were a lot of games in the first few rounds, which would be amazing to see.
And you never saw them.
Yeah. So that's too bad. But from a player's perspective, it's pretty brutal, right? I'm going to be here for the next few days thinking about my losses, thinking, what could I have done, that kind of thing. And I think it's probably better stretched out.
Okay. So you think if they had put more content on the later days?
Well, I mean, they had the best players in the world pretty much gathered for one super tournament, right?
Yeah.
And that's the idea. But then they decided to have the best games, theoretically, being broadcasted. Yet I think there were some amazing games that just won't be seen.
Yeah, absolutely. They weren't even on a second or third stream.
Right, exactly.
Just completely lost. Maybe someday someone will do them from replay.
Well, I know they Dropboxed all the replays, so we may or may not see them after.
Fantastic.
We might not, though.
That would be really amazing.
Well, sad for me for game one versus Ryung. We're not going to talk about that.
We're not going to talk about that game. All right. So, I mean, looking at the tournament field then, the people who are still in, who do you think is going to win this thing?
Sure. So my favorites would be Hero, Dongre-gu, and Linok. And then my favorite to win the entire thing would be Linok.
Linok? Yeah. Why?
Well, I mean, he's just an absolutely amazing player that does things that people don't consider to be possible. If you look at Entomb value of Bomber versus Linok at the last MLG, just jaw-dropping. How did you pull that off is the general consensus. Yeah. And so because he can do that consistently on a stage with a lot of pressure against players that aren't necessarily going to be playing their peak, he always plays his peak, and as a result, he wins tournaments. He goes all the way in long MLGs, which is just, I respect that a lot.
So why would he falter in a tournament like GSL?
Well, I mean, you have a much longer practice time. You have a week before your matches, and so they can be snipers. They can like practice builds over and over and over again on the same map just to win one map, and then if you win a second map, you're good. So I think that the format probably hurts him because it lends towards players like MVP.
So he's okay. Well, that's an interesting follow-up point then. Are you saying that MVP's entire basis of play is based on really, really good preparation?
Well, his mechanics are widely considered to be not the best.
Right. No, I agree with that.
And this game is largely mechanical, yet he still is able to have, I believe, a better understanding of what his opponent's mindset is and being able to abuse it.
Okay.
And so there's two levels of abusing your opponent mentally. One is in-game by showing information or misinformation and then using that. And another is out-of-game by preparing entire strategies based on your opponent's mindset. And MVP, I think, is the king of that.
Okay, interesting. And so that's how he's able to just win.
Well, yes. If you look at the time MVP went to Home Story Cup, whether it was 4 or 3, I can't remember, but people that, I'm pretty sure he got knocked out by people that weren't well known.
Yeah.
And that's just because, I mean, he didn't have time to prepare specific builds. He had to, because actually in the GSL you don't have to prepare for every build.
Yeah.
You often see very metagamey builds being used, especially in PvP. For the first year and a half of the GSL, PvP was, I'm not going to say a joke, but it was not what you see on the ladder. And that was because they can say, well, we can do builds that are going to be like 70-30 or 60-40 against these kind of builds and then 20-80 against this other build. But our player never does this 20-80 build, so we can be very abusive and very greedy or that kind of thing. And so PvP was really weird for the first year and a half. But now it's more standard. Okay.
Interesting to note. So, you know, with that sort of, you know, overall with all the players, you think Lennox's going to win. If you were going to pick the MVP of 2012,
it's just a huge question. I mean, there's MVPs in value, MVPs in success, and MVPs in potential, which is kind of like the runner-up.
Okay, well then do all three.
Now that's a challenge. I'd say the MVP in value is probably Stefano, largely because of his massive appeal to non-Korean
to foreign
audiences.
fans.
Yeah, and his success as well is leading up to that. And so that's value. And then success, I'd say probably Dongagu, not because of his most recent performances, but because of his mid-2012 dominance.
Okay.
And then...
yeah, he was kind of scary.
Yeah, it was amazing to watch Dongagu play. I actually watched over his shoulder MLG Anaheim in 2012.
Yeah, I was there casting, I remember.
My jaw dropped.
Yeah.
That no other player played like that.
Yeah.
Even though they're playing at 300 APM, Dongagu is playing at 150 more and he's using it. And they're not using all of their 300 APM. Yeah. It was scary to see, especially in a series against Puma and on the map Metropolis.
And, well, did you watch DRG versus MKP on Entombed, or not Entombed, Cloud Kingdom?
Yes.
He had creep to his third before, like,
yeah, that just doesn't happen for most of the players, And then the third one was the guy who could have been, right? And that's the hardest one to think about. And I'd say it's probably Alicia.
Okay.
Yeah, he's always right up there.
Short
consistently.
Stuff.
Yes, short stuff.
Short stuff.
Especially from that was his handle at MLG Summer Arena. Yeah. And he was
still
second.
That's still his US handle.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, I've never played him on the ladder.
Okay.
Too bad. But yeah, I'd say Alicia, just because he had a lot of potential and then did well. I mean, very well, better than most players, but just wasn't there all the way.
All right. Some interesting insight there from Eifer. Any shout-outs you'd like to make?
To my team, thank you, Simon, for sending me. To our sponsors, Sistema, Twitch. Thank you to my teammates for supporting me. Thanks to specifically Boyo for talking over the PvT matchup, even though it didn't go too well against Ryung. And thank you to everyone who watches me. I'll probably be bringing out some more content soon on strategy, and I hope that you look forward to that.
Good stuff. I have one additional question.
Okay.
PS.
Yeah.
If you were a balance designer for Blizzard, okay, you could make one change to Protoss. What change would that be?
Okay.
And I'm also you're allowed to make one change to each race.
Okay. Well, just for Protoss, I got this 100%.
But like
change the entire game.
All three of your changes have to be balanced with each other.
That's harder.
I know.
Just I'll start off with Protoss. That's buff gateway units and move warp to Twilight Council. That fixes practically everything the reliance on force field. It's a major change, and it changes how the early game plays out in all three matchups. but it's a huge change, which I think would be really, really good.
Okay, so move the Warp Gate tech to
Twilight Council. Yep.
So
and
you have
buff tier 1 units, make Stalker be damage bonus to light, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
And then make Immortals cheaper and 3 supply, that kind of thing. And those are multiple changes, right? But it fixes Protoss.
One change to Terran.
Okay. I haven't thought about this before. I couldn't really tell you, but I'd make their harass options less easier to scout. Right? Because imagine a Protoss player who gets his probe to the Terran base after the early 13-second depot or 14-second depot is put down. You don't know if he's gassed or not, and then you have to prepare for proxy factories, Hellion run-bys, Hellion drops, Marine. Yeah, there's like maybe 9 or 10, maybe 15 combinations.
Yeah, I was going to say at least
huge,
15.
Huge.
Okay. One change to Zerg.
Queens.
What
take them out and find a better way to have larva.
What's your better way to have larva?
I don't have one, but I just think that they're very problematic because they range 5 queens are problematic for being used as defense, even though they're also necessary to be gotten for defense, but also for economy. So you can't have a game without queens, and as a result, you're always protected against light forms of harass, right? Which means that especially in TVZ, that's very difficult. And I feel like their transfusability is it's a stopgap. It's an ability which allows Zergs to recover from situations where they haven't been injecting well, but all of a sudden now they can mass inject queens. I mean, a player which does this very well is Fitzy here. I mean, he's well known for it. But I mean, if there's a large Marine force coming towards the base and they've got 6 queens, transfuse.
The queens never die.
Because they're also being used for larva and creep sped, which will help in the mid-game and late game, especially. And it's just the combination of all the abilities on the queen just make it something I'd nix and rethink.
All right. Some really interesting points there. Thank you so much, Eifer, for the interview.
Thank you.
And I'm sure you'll see more content out of this guy soon. So definitely stay tuned. Follow him on Twitter, Twitch TV, all those good places, YouTube. Do you have a YouTube channel?
I don't. I have a Twitch, though. Twitch.tv/EiferSuchtig.
It's going to be soon.
Sorry to German people.
You're gonna have a YouTube soon, right?
We'll see.
All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and close this out. This is Gwin with Quantic.